G'day all, Farmer Gregie here. Now I've got to say I'm excited because I am about to watch The Game Changers. It is going to change the world, no question. All the vegans are saying that they're converting people to this way of life because it's the only way of life. Although, just as I hit play, the very first thing I read before the movie starts, it actually says, the statements expressed in this film are not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice. Awesome. We're off to a flyer. Pretty much disregard whatever's coming as professional medical advice. But that's okay. I'm just going to... So I'm actually watching real time as I'm giving some commentary. I'm just going to keep on hitting pause and coming back to the next thing when I get there. So I'll be back. Okay, I'm a couple of minutes in and the opening credits with a song that says, I'm a champion, I'm a killer, I'm a savage. I've been that way since the beginning. Awesome, good stuff. This is a peace-loving vegan documentary, but I'll come back to the relevance of that fairly soon. Okay, so we've just got the opening credits out of the way and we're going to focus on the bloke who's the driving force behind this, which is a fellow by the name of James Wilkes. And he has been teaching combat manoeuvres for over 15 years to the US Marines, the SWAT teams, the Navy SEALs. So fantastic. Peaceful, loving vegan that's been teaching combat manoeuvres to secret services and armed forces. So, okay, I can totally get the parallel there with where we're heading, maybe. So most of the manoeuvres that James Wilkes is teaching are banned in mixed martial arts. He says that this is life or death for the people who he's teaching it to, and he's honoured to be able to share that with them. So he is training humans to be killing machines. Yes, it's life or death, which means if you don't stay alive, you're dead. But that also means that you are going to intentionally kill another human. That's how war works, right? But this is the background of this peaceful, loving vegan. Okay, I've got to say I'm a bit confused already, but I'll see if it takes us somewhere else. But Wilkes then said that he had a background in martial arts because he was a problem child. So his parents wanted him to learn discipline. But despite learning all of what he learnt, he was bashed as a teenager. He learnt that Bruce Lee had the same thing happen to him when he was a teenager. So he looked into Bruce Lee's philosophy and learnt from Bruce Lee and put that into practice. So I don't know if Bruce Lee was ever a vegan or not. I'll see if they tell us as we watch. I guess if I don't bring Bruce Lee up again, then that means they never referred to him being a vegan. They just talked about his philosophy, and that was all about fighting, not food, by the way. Bruce Lee's philosophy was all about fighting. No mention of any food. Okay, so Wilkes went on to win a title as the Ultimate Fighter. And then after that happened, he was he had a serious injury and he did ligament damage to both of his knees, sparring with a future heavyweight champion. So he then proceeded to spend 1,000 hours apparently researching peer-reviewed science, how to recover and get back to being able to train, teach and compete as quickly as he could. So this led him to the gladiators, which I've been hearing quite a bit about the gladiators. And I don't know, I guess they're going to keep referring to peer-reviewed science, but But his expert here on the gladiators said that there was only one burial site where there were mass burials of the gladiators in one site, and that was in Turkey. So, of all the different places that gladiators used to fight back in the days of the Roman Empire, we're going to look at exhumed bones from one site. So I guess this should be fairly conclusive. You know, we can assume that all around the world, you know, or at least across Europe at the time, it'll be the same story for all gladiators. So I'll just see where we head with this one. I'll come back. Yep. Okay, so we spoke to one expert about 68 bodies that were exhumed in one site, and the theory behind what they were going to find was that if there was high levels of strontium in the bones, that would indicate a vegetarian or plant-based diet, and they're going to burn the bones, and if the flame turns blue or red or... So even the expert that they spoke to said that because of the tests that they did on this one site with 68 gladiators, it appeared they were predominantly vegetarian. Not vegan, vegetarian. Now, I get the impression that this is going to become a strong theme through the movie, because then we go back to James Wilkes and he says, wow, this blew my mind, that all that I thought I knew about nutrition, and it turns out that the gladiators were on a plant-based diet. Like, already we're talking plant-based. We're not saying vegan, and plant-based can have up to 20% animal products. Plant-based does not mean vegan, for a start. James Wilkes then suggested that the gladiators were the highest trained with access to the best medical help in the Roman Empire. Really? Did his research uncover that these highly prized fighters got the best medical help of all the people that were alive in that era? My understanding of the gladiators are that they were prisoners of war. They were effectively slaves of their master. Their life was valued lower than an animal. I mean, they had a lower value than an animal that the Romans of wealth would eventually eat. So I'm just going to keep on watching where this thread heads. But to be honest, my reading of the truth about the gladiators is that they were treated worse than animals in their day. And this documentary is already suggesting we should be like the gladiators. I think that's kind of sad, don't you? But I think James Wilkes is hinting at the fact that we should be treating vegans worse than we treat animals. Well, I wouldn't do that. I think vegans are still humans, and we shouldn't mistreat them. Okay, so now we're just up to the McGregor-Diaz fight, and we're going to go into a bit of a backstory before we get to the results of this fight, no doubt. But I've had a couple of spoiler alerts here that I think are very relevant. So they've made a big deal about the fact that McGregor eats steak for breakfast, lunch and tea, and Diaz is plant-based. Again, plant-based, not vegan. So James does some research, because the whole, you know how boxing works, and these guys are UFC fighters. So, you know, there's the whole in-your-face leading up. McGregor is taunting the fact that Diaz eats vegetables, and I'm a lion and he's a gazelle. So there's all of the usual stuff going on. in the pre-fight. But they've hinted in this particular documentary that Diaz was a late replacement for the McGregor fight because McGregor was going to fight someone else who pulled out. So Diaz only had 11 days to prepare. What they didn't actually say was that McGregor had been shedding weight to fight in 155-pound category, and Diaz actually weighed 170 pounds. So with 11 days to go before the fight, McGregor is now trying to bulk up to fight a fair fight against a bloke who weighed 15 pounds more than him. 15 pounds, that's like 7 kilograms. So that's a substantial advantage in a fight. Now, if you're trying to lose weight fast or put weight on fast, that's probably not going to do a lot for your levels of energy and strength. So that happened before this fight. And we haven't got to the result of the fight yet. I know how that plays out. I'll come back to that in a moment. But this led Wilkes to wonder, are there any other plant-based athletes excelling around the world? And so he did a search for plant-based, not vegan. I've also learnt, since I'm watching this right now, but Diaz is not a vegan. He has said that he eats lots of eggs. Now, if anybody eats eggs or dairy, that is providing animal products, animal fats, animal proteins that are not available in plants. So it's a pretty big stretch already to be talking about this elite athlete that's plant-based being a vegan when that's actually not true. Okay, so they looked at this elite endurance runner, Scott Jurek, who went on to break a new world record. Again, he was plant-based. I don't think he at any point referred to the word vegan. And you won't see it in this movie, but the record that he broke a few years ago has since been broken by 5 days, like not 5 hours, because he was running effectively 2 marathons a day. That was a massive effort to do that. I don't care what you're eating, that's a massive effort. But his record mark that was set, 3 years ago, has been broken by 5 days since then by a meat eater, not a vegan or a vegetarian. So we then started to look at the history of all these athletes over time that had been Olympic gold medalists, and they kept referring to them as plant-based and, a meat-free diet. But it was always vegetarian. Like, does James Wilkes not understand the difference between vegan and vegetarian? I'm pretty sure he does. So they were highlighting different athletes, including our own Murray Rose, who was sticking to a vegetarian diet, which almost certainly means he was eating eggs and dairy, not meat as such. And then the last one, they just looked at Carl Lewis, becoming vegan, breaking the world record, performing the best times he ever had at the age of 30. And then guess what happened to Carl Lewis? He broke down and his career ended, like just after he turned vegan. And he's actually the first person, I'm watching this and we're nearly a quarter of an hour into the movie, and he was the first person that literally said the word vegan. Interesting. So then we came to another Aussie, Morgan Mitchell, who was the Australian champion 400 metre runner, represented Australia at the 2016 Olympics. And again, she had turned vegan, was saying about all these things that were happening that were positive. And what they don't go on to say in this movie, which is what I've seen from some of the other commentaries that have debunked the movie, is that Morgan Mitchell is unable to beat college athletes in America now. So it may have worked briefly, but it didn't actually prolong her career she didn't be, she wasn't able to keep performing at that same level. So, American cyclist Dotsie Bausch then tells us how she became vegan and turned into a machine. Like, she used to leg press 300 pounds, but after she became a vegan, she started pressing 585 pounds. So she was already a champion cyclist before she turned into a vegan, and then she started leg pressing almost double. Well, if she was already winning American titles and then she could do double the leg press, why did her times not improve so much on the bike that she became the world champion? She did compete at the 2012 Olympics and win the silver medal. But shouldn't leg presses translate to cycle speed? Very scientific. Very scientific. I'm just looking at the science aspect of that. Certainly makes for riveting viewing. So then James was confused about how we don't need meat. He's finding out all these things. So he reached out to a team physician who had won 2 titles, Dr. James Loomis, who had won a World Cup in baseball and a Super Bowl. And Dr. James goes on to explain how protein doesn't have to come from meat. The cows, the sheep, the pigs, the chickens, they're just the middleman. The protein originally comes from the plants that those animals eat. So his theory is we can just eat the plants, right? But that's actually not even true. The protein doesn't come from the plants. The protein comes from the soil. So this is science that's been debunked. It's a joke to say that the animals are the middleman. The animals are no more the middleman than the plants. According to him, if you want to go straight to the source and get your protein, then eat some dirt. That's where it all comes from. All of our protein, all of our nutrients come from the soil. So get out in your back garden and, take a spoon with you and just dig in. Moron. So this bit I love, James Wilkes has just said that all the athletes we're looking at so far have just been lean athletes because we're looking at speed and endurance. So where are the big guys? And then we go to Kendrick Farris, who was the only American to represent the USA at the 2012 and 16 Olympics. And he became a vegan. Again, this stuff you won't find in the movie, but I've seen the actual numbers shared by a number of people. And in a lower weight category, when he was at the 2008 Olympics, he literally lifted more weight than when he was a heavier athlete. And yes, sure, he was a bit older, but as we know, when you watch weightlifting, age is not a barrier. Quite often they are still very competitive until a bit later in life. So it's not like the young guys beat the old guys when it comes to weightlifting. And he was, making a big deal about the fact he became vegan. And it's like we're supposed to believe that he's now doing better than he did as a non-vegan. Well, he did in his first month or 2 as a vegan. But then a year or 2 later, he broke down, became injured, and has stopped competing. I don't even know if he's still a vegan, but he stopped competing as a vegan. He sustained injuries that ended his career. And Kendrick makes the comment that, man, I should have done this a long time ago. But for 90% of his life, he was not a vegan. So he built his entire base of strength by not being a vegan. I just find that amazing that they don't understand that they became who they were as an omnivore or carnivore, and very short term might see a benefit from a vegan or vegetarian diet, which is effectively a detox. It's a detox. You're cleansing your system, but it's not sustainable long term. It's a very short term detox. It's probably going to be the biggest laugh of this doco, but Patrick Baboumian's next. You know, Patrick Baboumian is one of the world's strongest men. Apparently, he holds a whole heap of world records, but he's never actually competed in the world's strongest man, which, you know, is a tournament in its own right. And they quote him saying, "People ask me, how can you be as strong as an ox and you don't eat meat?" And he says, "Have you ever seen an ox eating meat?" Oh, that's kind of funny, isn't it? So for those of you that don't know your anatomy real well, cattle are ruminants, and their small intestine is about 20 times the length of their body. And yes, all they eat is plants. They're herbivores, they're ruminants. And the human small intestine is only about 3 times as long as our body. So, what a bizarre comment to make. Maybe he should be chewing his cud like an ox, if he's as strong as an ox. Because that's what they do, isn't it? Ruminants have 4 stomachs. They swallow the food, they spit it back up, and then they chew it some more. As humans, we don't tend to do that. I don't think it'd taste real good if we spit it back up and have a bit more of a chew on it. Do you? Okay, so they say in the film that Patrick says himself he stopped eating meat in 2005, and he became heavier and stronger after that. It's slightly misleading because he didn't actually become a vegan until 2011. And this is where all the smoke and mirrors happens around veganism, suggesting that if you're plant-based, you're vegan. He literally became plant-based in 2005 and didn't become a vegan for another 6 years. And then he broke a couple of world records just after he became a vegan, and effectively in less than 2 years of being a vegan, I think. So I just went to the wiki page while I'm having a look on Wikipedia here and looking at his different accomplishments. He probably hasn't done a lot over the last 4 or 5 years, and effectively, stopped competing. I think one of the frustrating things they don't mention unless it's coming, I'm going to keep watching, but he has admitted to using steroids, as so many of those strongmen competitors do. So let's eat plants and use steroids. Like, that's a really healthy way to go about breaking world records, isn't it? Strange. Oh dear. So then we're going to move on from Patrick Baboumian to another big boy, Bryant Jennings. World heavyweight contender, boxer. So again, I've just paused the movie and I've gone and had a quick look at Wiki because I'm curious. He's making a big deal about the fact that he's a vegan, and why didn't he know all this stuff sooner? As a professional boxer, he had won 19 consecutive bouts. 19. The last 2 of them after he turned vegan. He then proceeded, and remembering that often when people turn vegan, they might feel a bit of a health benefit right at the start. I'm talking inside a year. But then less than 2 years after he had turned vegan, he proceeded to lose 4 of his next 9. And from what I can see here, the last 2 fights he's fought, he lost this year. So I don't know. Doesn't seem like a real good advertisement for the way to enhance your performance as an elite athlete. To go from 100% record 19-0 to only be able to win a bit over half of your next 9 fights. I'm just an observer here. I'm just looking at real results. This is not about science, just cause and effect. Okay, so I'm not going to comment much about this, but they do a trial where they eat, they've got 3 guys from the Miami Dolphins and they eat plant-based burrito versus beef versus chicken. Look at the endothelial function of the blood plasma. And this is really clever because it's telling you and I, who know nothing about mainstream medicine or science, that this looks bad because it's cloudy versus clear. Yet I've seen multiple people since the movie debunk that as any kind of problem whatsoever. That is a natural function of the blood. And there's nothing negative about what we see here, but they portray it as being a very negative outcome if we're consuming meats. And very cleverly, they then show why this is going to be better for us, because trials by consuming beet juice will improve cycling by 22% and weightlifting by 19%. But as I saw Sean Baker make the observation that 19% increase in strength is more than you will get from using steroids. So are we going to listen to that as science-based evidence? I mean, why would everyone not have been drinking beet juice all these years and smashing world records instead of turning to steroids? I'm just dumbfounded, to be honest. Because then they move on to the example of plant versus animal proteins, and they're talking about the impact through inflammation. And the example they use with meat is a hamburger. So they start carrying on about a single hamburger, which is actually 50% plant-based. Yeah, so more science, baffle people with the science and it looks legit. And they make a suggestion that by moving to plants, which are antioxidant rich, you will reduce inflammation by 29% in 3 weeks. Wow. Like, we don't need doctors then, do we, to deal with ill health and inflammation? We just all change to plants and we solve our problems, if it's that simple. And we've just flicked back to our American cyclist who made the Olympic team for the USA at 39 and beat Australia by 8/100ths of a second for the team pursuit, winning gold medal, which is awesome. I mean, good on her. But I guess there were 3 meat eaters in her team pursuit team, and she was a vegan. So, I don't know. She didn't win an individual gold medal at the Games. I'm probably just questioning whether the team would have been able to get over the line if all 4 were vegans. Maybe they would have. So then we talked to a pro NFL player, Derek Morgan. He became a vegan in 2017. And again, with the benefit of looking at Wikipedia and his stats, 2018 became his worst ever season as a professional footballer during the whole decade. So he turned pro in 2010 and returned his worst ever performance in 2018, the year after becoming a vegan, with a career low, and also on retirement. He's announced his retirement only 18 months after becoming a vegan. He had three serious injuries with knee and shoulder. And ironically, in the documentary, it's portrayed that he became a vegan because it enhanced recovery time. So he was researching. He said the injury rate in the NFL is 100%. In other words, everyone gets injured who plays NFL. I'm talking gridiron, American football. So he became a vegan so he could recover faster, but it actually induced his retirement due to injuries sustained after becoming a vegan. Yeah, so then of course, we're on a personal journey here. So we go into Wilkes' dad, who suffered a heart attack. He thought he was always healthy and doing the right thing. And we cue a few specialist doctors. And one of them is Dr. Dean Ornish. Now, the vegan movement loved to refer to Dr. Ornish and his ideology around plant-based eating. This is one of the intentional confusions that I think stems from the idea that plant-based and veganism are the same things. But Dr. Ornish himself is not a vegan. He talks about plant-based, and that actually incorporates about 5 different dietary options, of which one is vegan, one is vegetarian, pescatarians, lacto-vegetarians. Like, he incorporates anything that's plant-based and readily recommends the importance of seafood or some animal products like eggs and dairy. So it's like all of a sudden we've jumped on this bloke who talks about plant-based because that's one and the same with veganism, and that is absolutely not true. Not even Dr. Ornish is saying that plant-based and veganism are the same thing. To be a vegan is falling under the plant-based umbrella, because anyone that's consuming more plants than animals is effectively plant-based. Yeah, so it's drama, and baffling science, and confuse us with smoke and mirrors. And now we're going to go and talk about firefighting, because the number one killer of firefighters is heart attacks. So they've gone through this series of science that suggests that meat and animal products cause heart disease, all of which, by the way, has been completely debunked. In fact, the opposite seems to be true when you look deeper into the science. But anyway, I just wonder, my first thought is, when it comes to firefighters, I wonder if there's any stress in their workplace. I wonder if they experience stress during their day job. Maybe that has some impact on the incidence of heart disease among firefighters. I could be wrong again. And so they proceed to give the firefighters a 7-day challenge of eating plants and see what it does to their vital statistics, their overall health, running tests. Of course it should make a positive difference. It's a detox. That would be like a water fast for 7 days. You're going to clear out a lot of impurities in your body if you just drink water for a week. So it has no relevance to long-term health and well-being. It's a very short-term detox, which is why, again, a lot of people find there to be health benefits in that initial stage of a plant-only diet. Of course, enter Arnold Schwarzenegger, and even himself is talking about plant-based. No mention of vegan, and we're going through, that it's a fast, that we ever needed meat in the first place to get our protein, and we can do this through a vegetarian diet. Even he says himself in this film, vegetarian. He's not talking about veganism. He's not even suggesting that he doesn't eat any animal products. So I'm just trying to connect the dots here for you guys. Arnie suggests that his cholesterol is the lowest it's ever been in his life, and I can't remember, I think he's nearly 70 or something like that. But again, as so many of us are starting to become aware, is there really any such thing as high cholesterol? Like, we have been lied to about the cholesterol myth for the last 3, 4, 5 decades. So to suggest that this is a positive thing because he's now a vegetarian instead of a carnivore doesn't really mean much. They're going to go back into some more science now. Dr. Ornish is telling us all about the percentage cause of deaths, and nearly all of the numbers in this movie have been debunked. Like, it's cherry-picked science. You can do your own research, or you can just totally believe the vegan bias that they're putting on this. But again, Dr. Ornish is talking plant-based all the time. He's never been talking about veganism as such. Wow. So I'm actually quite baffled here, because referring to real science, as I keep being told I need to do, and in this documentary, they then suggest that humans, if we look at history, humans are actually more like herbivores than carnivores because of our digestive system. And they show the stats that the length of the digestive system of a human is 15 times our body size or body length, compared to a lion, which is 4 times their body length. So I just did a quick Google search, and all the information I can find is telling me that the human digestive system, including the esophagus, the mouth and the esophagus, I'm going to count that in there, is approximately 6 times as long as our body. Not 15, 6. And a lion is 4. It's like, here's one of their really important points that they're going to make to anybody who watches this documentary that won't go away and do their own research. I don't even know. It's like a fabrication. It's like something they've just made up for the sake of the doco. Like, I don't get that. I don't understand how the producers and directors of a documentary that's going to be shown to people around the world are so happy to use that kind of creative license. I don't understand. Okay, I've got to say one thing that I do appreciate that they've done in this film is they're playing on human emotion really well. And they did that with Patrick Baboumian, because his mum and dad and 6-month-old sister were in a car accident when he was 4 years old, and his mum was the only one that survived the accident. So, of course, that's a tragedy. You wouldn't wish that on anyone. So he had this dream since he was a child to be able to help people and be able to flip a car over if somebody was trapped. And then they then show him flipping a car, which, hey, got me a little bit too. I mean, that's pretty special. But they're kind of playing on this human emotion, like this is the right thing to do and a better thing to do, and you can do it by only eating plants. And in comes what is no doubt going to be the highlight of the film. We're going to now look at, I think it's Dr. Aaron Spitz, who talks about, so they've just gone a bit on again about the fake marketing around meat and how it makes you a real man, and how a real man should be strong and athletic and have sexual prowess. So we're now going to find out that eating meat will deteriorate your sexual performance. So I'm curious how they're going to play this one out, but I'll just see what they have to say. So I am a little bit curious. We're back at the Miami Dolphins again, only we're not going to deal with the same 3 athletes that we dealt with earlier, because one of them was a vegan. Okay, one was a vegan, and the other 2 were not. And that's when we looked at the blood plasma, if you remember. So this time we're back at the Miami Dolphins. We got 3 different footy players. These are college football players. So stay tuned. So the theory behind the fact we're going to prove that a plant diet is better for people's manlyhood, they effectively fed these 3 young fellows 2 different meals, 2 different nights. And the first night it was meat and chicken on a burrito, and the next night it was all plant burrito. Now, they had to actually put a couple of rings over their penis and sleep with that so that they could monitor the size of their erection and the number of erections during the night. So when the results come back, now they didn't suggest that these 3 guys were vegans. They didn't tell us what they were eating leading up to the experiment. And this is not a scientific study. This is just an experiment. So they found that all of them had a slightly bigger circumference erection after they ate plants. And the number of erections and the time of the erection increased by between 300 and 470%. So between 3 and 4 times as long a period of time that they experienced an erection during their sleep. Dr. Aaron Spitz himself said at the end of this little feature that this was not a scientific study, but the results were quite exciting. Like, he's a science guru and he's acknowledging that this is just an experiment. It's not scientific research as such. And I'm just trying to come to a conclusion of what does this actually mean. Well, I think what it means is that if you eat meat, you prefer the real thing to be on your penis. And if you eat only plants, you get more excited with something fake when it's on your penis. Maybe. They then lead into the fact that testosterone levels, led to believe that testosterone would be higher on meats and soy products could potentially repress your testosterone or your libido. I just think it's really interesting because a lot of the ex-vegans who are coming out now making their YouTube clips about what happened to them are actually identifying the fact that they had almost no sex drive as a vegan. It had dried up, effectively. They were thinking more about eating food than having sex because they just needed to eat all the time because they were always hungry. And in comes Nimai Delgado, who is a professional bodybuilder. Just a little bit of a heads up, he claims to have never eaten meat in his life, which is fine. But he was actually a vegetarian. He used to eat lots of eggs and dairy up until 2015. And at that time, he was still winning first place, at bodybuilding events. And then when he became vegan, he never won another title. Like within 6 months of becoming vegan, he started placing 7th and 8th in the meets that he was competing at. So that was as a vegan. Previously, he was winning as a vegetarian. Yeah, so we go into more science again, and it's estrogens versus phytoestrogens versus the impacts on cortisol and testosterone and estrogen and all these things that they're sharing. I can only assume that they are from cherry-picked research. Like nearly everything they're talking about here has been debunked by real science. In fact, the true science behind a lot of this is showing exactly the opposite to what this movie is. So I guess there's going to be a lot of disappointed people when they go and do all the things that are being suggested in this movie, thinking they're going to get this positive impact because, well, no, actually, that's probably not fair. They may well see that positive impact for the first 6 months of their transition, because with the benefit of hindsight now, I'm watching this and I've seen a lot of the guys who have debunked the game changers are watching it with the hindsight of the way all these people who are featured crashed and burned after this was filmed. But knowing that, this film was released knowing the outcomes of all the athletes that were involved in the film. So I'm sort of trying to defend these guys in a sense that they filmed this believing what they were capturing was true, but they released it knowing the end result of what actually happened, what unfolded over the next year or two, 3 years after they started filming. They actually released this to the wider community, to the general public, knowing that this had not played out well. We're seeing that today with all the results coming in from the athletes who have starred in the Game Changers. Okay, then we came back to Derek Morgan, our NFL champion, and apparently his wife is a chef, and she started cooking vegan food for all the team. So we have this whole buffet laid out about all this food that looks like animal food. It's, vegan burgers and buffalo wings and cheese, and none of it's real animal products, but the players love that it tastes so good. And I'm just going to have a quick look at those players, as I look at Derek Morgan's mates. Well, by the way, Derek himself, he became a vegan and proceeded to get injured. He had a career low performance in 2018 and announced his retirement after injury this year. So he's done. Of his mates that paraded one after the other, Daquan Jones, look, he got injured too just after becoming a vegan, but he was placed on the injured reserve list and then did go on last year and have a average kind of a season. I'm looking at the stats. I'm trying to read NFL stats. Kind of a probably third, the worst stats in his last 3 years, but he's still playing at least. We look at Rashard Matthews, again, became a vegan and proceeded to have the worst 2 years of his career in the last decade. He was placed on the injured list also, and he has now been released from that team, the Tennessee Titans, and he has announced his retirement this year. That's just 2 years after becoming a vegan. We got here Wesley Woodyard. At least he's still going. He, he's had a reasonable couple of years since becoming a vegan. Or is he a vegan? He went and ate vegan food for the purpose of our documentary. I don't know that he's actually a vegan. Jarrell Casey, yep, he's still going. And yeah, his stats haven't really improved. They haven't slipped back. He's still playing for the Tennessee Titans. Brian Arakipo. Yeah, he had one of his worst years last year and has announced his retirement. And Ty Smith, not a lot of stats there. He's just a fairly young fellow coming through the ranks now. I don't know. I'm a little bit confused what they were trying to prove there. if they were saying that all of those guys had become vegans because one of their mates' wives was cooking vegan food for them. Her name's Charity Morgan. I think she's still cooking vegan food as a chef. But it just didn't stack up real well for the purpose of longevity on a vegan diet, if that's what they were trying to explain to us. It didn't really end up so well for most of those players. So here is perhaps the most ironic part of the whole film. James is now drawing a comparison with his grandfather dying at the age of 63 because of a lifetime of smoking, and he's pissed off because his health's improving and his dad's health's improving and his wife and child are on board with this plant-based diet, and why does the world not know how good this plant-based diet is for our health? So he's drawing a comparison with the fact that they used to use elite athletes to promote the health benefits of smoking. I'm sure if you look back into the advertising campaigns, a lot of movie stars were jumping all over promoting cigarettes as well. Back in the 30s, 40s, 50s. I mean, he's even made mention of Babe Ruth, the baseball player. Anyone who's ever known anything about sport would know that name. So the irony in the parallel he's drawing here to me is that this is exactly what the vegan movement is doing today. They're utilising sports stars and movie stars to promote the merits of veganism as a healthy choice. Just like back in the 30s, 40s and 50s, we used to use sports stars and movie stars to promote the merits of smoking as a healthy lifestyle. Like, he's kind of drawing the same comparison that I am, except he's suggesting it in reverse. And we're seeing more and more, we're seeing more and more these really high-profile people coming out and trying to sell the world on veganism as a healthy choice, just like smoking was back in the day. They then moved straight from condemning cigarettes and showing how they got banned from being sponsors and promoted at major sporting events, and another big player stepped up to take their place. And they're about to start bagging all of the fast food industries. McDonald's, Subway, Burger King, KFC. But fast food has always been known as not good for our health. It's irrelevant whether it's plant or animal based. Like, you do not want to live on a fast food diet. That stuff has been destroyed through processing. Like, there's no parallel here to be drawn between fast food and animal products. None at all. I mean, the food is heavily damaged through processing. So, completely irrelevant. But let's play that card because it makes for good footage in our mockumentary. James himself then goes on to condemn the meat, egg and dairy industries for muddying the waters here, for covertly tricking people into thinking that animal products never cause any of our health issues. And I just think, isn't that interesting, while I'm watching a documentary whose producer, director, James Cameron, owns $140 million worth of shares in the biggest pea protein manufacturing facility in the world. Yeah. Does that not ring alarm bells for somebody else?
Works beautifully for people.
So they just also use the analogy, drawing the link between secondhand smoke and cancer. And here I am watching a vegan propaganda piece, and I'm really concerned about the impact on my health because I could experience secondhand exposure. I might be negatively impacted almost as badly as vegans by eating all that rubbish that they think's good for their health and not consuming animal products. So even on my Facebook page, I'm concerned about the secondhand exposure I'm now getting to vegans from around the world. I'm not a homophobe, but perhaps I'm a bit of a vegaphobe. I better keep a close eye on that. I don't want it to negatively impact my health and well-being. Now they're going to show a whole heap of media and a lot of reports, and they're going to say about diet plans are confused and muddled. And this is like an intentional ploy to trick people into thinking what's good for them. I totally agree with that. In the opposite context of what this movie is portraying. They are intentionally confusing and muddling people with what they share and the data that they cherry pick so that you think you now know a better way, a healthier way. And even while they're trying to portray all of this to, bamboozle you into thinking that something's better for you, they keep referring to plant-based, plant-heavy diet. Like, I've hardly ever heard through this whole documentary, I'm getting near the end of it now, I've hardly ever heard the concept that a plant-only diet is better for your health. Other than a few isolated incidents of athletes who have since broken down and stopped competing. Now we come to the lowest blow of the entire film, and I've been talking in jest about the dribble they're going on with all the way through, but now we've gone to South Africa or Zimbabwe. I didn't notice where we were in Africa. And we're going to talk about the almost extinction of the rhinoceros because they've been hunted for their horn. I thought this was about a plant-based diet. What has hunting rhinoceros got to do with eating meat? At what point in human evolution did we hunt the rhinoceros to eat them instead of harvest the horn? I'm sure we did at some point in time. There's no question. The tribes of Africa would have hunted any animal for food back in the day. But this has nothing to do with a plant-based diet or a carnivore diet. This has nothing to do with whether meat is good or bad for you. This is just a really clever play on people's emotional heartstrings. Let's just pull them, let's just pull those heartstrings. I don't know many omnivores or carnivores that would say, let's go wild game hunting for pleasure. I'm happy for somebody watching this to reach out to me and let me know that that is a part of the psyche of a person who eats meat. I mean, this is a part of the reason why we farm animals. We're not killing and eating endangered species. We have breeding programs in place so that they're never likely to die out because farmers are taking care of these animals and raising more animals. So for me, yes, I've enjoyed the light entertainment value of it up until now. I just think it's a joke to go this path and condemn people who eat meat as wild game hunters of rhinoceros. Pathetic. 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 Yeah, and more of the same. Dead elephant because some bloke wanted an elephant's tusk on his desk. Like, show me the relevance to a carnivore or an omnivore of endangered species being shot and killed for trophies. Like, that thought doesn't even cross my mind. I would love to travel the world and visit places and see native wildlife in their own habitat. I would not even for one moment considering trying to kill any of them. And I will keep eating meat because it's good for my health. Yeah, I kind of smile again. I mean, I'm sure he's an awesome bloke. Damien Mander, he's saving these animals in Africa from the poachers, and he's training people to protect them. But he had this realisation that he's protecting animals during the day and then throwing an animal on the fire at night and eating it. So he had to stop doing that. He had to stop being hypocritical. And then he suggested that, well, we never really needed meat in the first place because look at a gorilla. A gorilla will fuck you up. And what does a gorilla eat? It eats grass. But again, a gorilla has a different digestive system. When I referred back earlier to the digestive system, and they lied about the human digestive system, suggesting it was 15 times as long as our body, when it's actually only about 5 or 6 times as long as our body. A gorilla's digestive system is 20 times the length of their body. It's kind of like a cow. They are built a different way to only eat plants. So it's irrelevant. But for me, he's saying the best way to protect the animals is to not put them in your mouth, blah, blah, blah. This high and mighty vegan position of saving the animals by not eating them is a lie. It's just an absolute lie. I mean, time and time again, the research is showing that 25 times as many animals die in the production of plant food, and vegans seem happy to eat plants. But they refuse to acknowledge that animals die in the production of plants, even though you don't eat the animal. The animal is just collateral damage. It's in the way. It's going to die. Doesn't matter if that's in the planting of the food or the harvesting of the crop or the poisoning of the animals or the shooting of the animals that are trying to eat the food that was meant for you. Like, come on, Damien. Do you not understand that if you're eating plants, while you're protecting rhinoceros and elephants in Africa, which is an admirable cause, good for you, there are farmers shooting the birds and the deer and the roos and the possums that are trying to steal the food that is being grown for vegans. Think about it. Think about it. Okay, so this is going to be really interesting. I haven't seen this yet. I don't want to make a predetermined judgment. But Damien just led into the fact that the meat animal are the biggest threat to our land because they're taking over the land. So the meat animals are taking land away from native animals. And we've zoomed out and we're now going to look at the globe and we're going to check out pasture and cropped land for animals and cropped land for humans. I'm going to make a really early assumption here that they won't fudge these figures because remember, this is a documentary. Yeah, so I'm probably not going to comment much more on this aspect. They are misrepresenting numbers for the convenience of the documentary. They show the number that 83% of all of the world's farmland is utilised by farm animals. And the reality is that almost all of that land is not actually able to be used for cropping of any kind. So if you know anything about agriculture, most of the land around the world where animals run It's, it's free range, it's pasture based, it's grasslands. There's zero irrigation, it's dry land farming. And you can't grow crops there even if you want to. So the animals are eating in all those parts of the world, the massive majority of the 83%, the animals are eating whatever's growing there that is not fit for human consumption. Like, people can't eat the stuff the animals are eating. The animals are then converting that into a food source that we can eat. They're now going to go into the fact, they're going to go into factory farming. They're saying that most of the land that's being taken over is for animals or to feed animals. And this is something that the vegan community has been very effective at, blatantly lying about the amount of food that is grown to feed animals versus humans. Like, they have complete disregard for the truth. And again, I don't think that's okay to lie about the amount of food that's grown for people versus animals, because you're misleading people when you're doing that. So I just question why you would do that. Why would you intentionally lie about these numbers, other than to mislead people into following your lifestyle because it's going to be beneficial for the planet, and it's actually not true. So I'm going to keep watching a bit. I won't comment much more on this, I don't think, because it's a little bit, now we're going to go into the old Cowspiracy and Earthlings and some of those other documentaries where they're just going to portray factory farming and turn people against animal products because of factory farming. And I'm kind of on the same page with that anyway. I really do believe that we need to farm animals in their natural environment, get them back out into the paddock, free range, pasture based, and we need the support of the consumer to make that happen. We don't need the consumer to boycott all animal agriculture. We need the consumer to understand that they can support free range animal agriculture. And that costs more money. It literally costs more money, but you get value for money. It's a cost benefit, if you will, look at it that way. Oh yeah, cool. So now we're going to talk about water, and all the animal agriculture is stealing all the water. It's not getting to the ocean. And I don't think the vegan movement has ever truly considered the fact that if we stop eating animals, because that's what they want us to do, then all of the crops in the world will be for human consumption. And all of the same things that they're complaining about happening right now with water, with deforestation, that will all be happening to feed humans. Crops that are grown partially right now for animals, partially for humans. In the future, that will all be for humans. So we're not going to actually benefit anyone by withdrawing our support of animal agriculture and growing crops for humans instead of crops for animals. Again, misrepresentation of the numbers. Absolutely. So it's pretty cool now where they're going to baffle us with science again. They're going to throw numbers at us and they're going to show us how unsustainable this is. And we've talked about the fact that 83% of the world's farmland is used for animals. And they've tried to suggest that all the deforestation is happening because of animals. And this is tugging on emotional heartstrings again, because you're going to feel bad about these sort of things. And then they show the numbers that suggest that nearly a quarter of the world's fresh water is required to produce animal products. Well, just let's pivot back here a moment to the reality that the 83% of farmland that's used for animals isn't capable of growing crops fit for human consumption. And I think it might be a fair point in time to explain that nearly all of the water, where they show that 2,400 litres of water is required to produce, I can't remember, a pound or a kilogram, probably a kilogram if they're talking litres, of beef. But if all those farm animals are running in land that's not able to grow crops for either animal food or human food, and it's on predominantly dry land farm, then that means that nearly all of that water that they're talking about is falling from the sky. Now, to suggest for a moment that we can just stop producing animal products for human consumption and we're going to grow plants, we can't use most of that 83% of the land, and we won't benefit from the rain that falls naturally on that land. We will have to look at the remaining 17% of farmland that requires irrigation. So, they're stretching a pretty long bow here. All of these things they're talking about, if you know nothing about agriculture and you don't want to do a Google search and go to the 3rd or 4th page of your search to find out the truth about food production, then this is a very compelling argument. Well done, guys. They've done a great job in portraying some things that are pretty far removed from reality. But it's effective. I'm sure it is. Okay. So we talked a little bit about pollution, and they showed the way that all the farm animals are polluting the water systems. They didn't bother to mention the way crops are grown on an industrial scale to feed humans. They didn't mention anything about herbicides and pesticides that are used to grow plant-based food for humans, because it's not all going to be organic food. I know a lot of people think, well, we'll just eat organic. No, you won't, because that's much more expensive, and we know human nature shows us time and time again that they want to buy what is cheapest. And the cheapest plant-based options are massive polluters of the planet, just like animals. So, whatever. Null and void, but thank you for sharing. And now we've got back onto global emissions. And at least since Cowspiracy, because Cowspiracy tried to tell us only 5 years ago that 51% of all global emissions came from cows. Not agriculture, not livestock, but cows. At least these guys are saying it's only 15%. Maybe vegans are dyslexic. 15, 51, same numbers. Same two numbers, aren't they? But anyway, it's 15%. Now it's apparently 15%, which they then go on to say is the same as all of the transport around the world combined. The cars, the trucks, the buses, the planes, the ships. Well, I don't know where they got that number from, because the numbers I'm seeing are suggesting that transport equates to 28% of global emissions, not less than 15, like this documentary is telling anyone who wants to listen. It's like they're not even close to sharing the truth. And now we've just gone back to the firefighters in New York after their 7-day detox on a plant-only diet. And the results are in, and it's all very exciting because miraculously all their numbers are looking so much better after a 7-day detox. Here is this film going to promote to the world that the future is veganism based on 7 days worth of eating, based on sexual performance after one vegan meal, based on our blood plasma after one vegan meal. I'm just trying to understand. I mean, I'm looking at this very cynically. I totally get that. But there are people who are going to cling to this sort of stuff because they can change the world and improve their health based on all this real science. All of this stuff in this documentary is the real science that those random strangers were hating on me for last week because I don't know anything about real science. And this is the direction they were pointing me to get my information from. I don't know how many of them suggested I needed to watch this movie because it would change my mind. So far, it's bad news. My mind is not wavering. I don't think I was pre-corrupted to a point where I'm not watching this open-minded. I'm just watching this, accepting the way they're distorting everything they're sharing. Because that's what they're doing. So for fear of sharing a little bit of personal information, we're watching James Wilkes' story here and the way his father's recovered from a heart attack, and everything around this is about plant-based. Again, plant-based. Rarely anything has been referred to as vegan. It's nearly all plant-based, whole food, which aligns with a lot of what I say. I'm talking about real food. But suggestion of probability of dying if he didn't only eat plants, and the New York Fire Brigade going on about their lower cholesterol and now they're healthy and they're less likely to have a heart attack during their job. My mum and dad are both very fortunate to still be with us here today. And I'm just going to think back. I think it was about 15 years ago. My dad was diagnosed with a stage 4 melanoma. He had surgery. They cut a piece out of his stomach, I guess, below his ribs, nearly the size of a dinner plate, to make sure they got it all. And, when Dad was a young fella working on the farm, probably in his teens and 20s, he never even wore a shirt. Like, they just used to get around in the King G stubbies, and, he was exposed to a lot of sun back in the day. But that happened 15 years ago, had surgery, skin graft, the whole lot. It's all healed. And he continues to eat meat and full cream dairy to this day. Like, it doesn't seem to have negatively impacted his likelihood of heart disease or cancer, even though that happened. My mum is very fortunate to be with us. Mum had a massive heart attack. Just looking at the time, it was about 9.5 years ago. And she was rushed in an ambulance, and we didn't think she was going to make it. And she was rushed in an ambulance. I told the ambulance to take her to the best hospital. I didn't care. I'll pay the excess. And they took her to Green Slopes. And she spent some time in Green Slopes, but the staff at Green Slopes actually said her heart attack, like of all the heart attack victims they'd seen, and it's a heart specialist hospital, they said she was the worst heart attack victim that they've seen leave the hospital alive. Of course, at the time, she was put onto statins. You're going to die if you don't take these tablets, and blah, blah, blah. And, I'm sure Mum has been more conscious of her health, but she continues to consume meat and dairy to this day. And she had so many side effects from those statins that she actually stopped taking them. She was experiencing muscle pain, joint pain, fatigue, dizziness, brain fog, depression. She actually took herself off the tablets that she was told that would keep her alive 9 years ago. She's still with us. Lots of you guys have been for a farm tour. You get to meet my mum. Every time we have a farm tour, Mum's there hosting. Mum coordinates the farm tours. She's still heavily involved in the family business. And, the correlation, I'm watching this documentary telling everybody that you're going to die from heart attack or cancer if you consume meat and dairy. It's a total fabrication. I just find that incredibly frustrating. That we are comfortable, from Hollywood to throw millions of dollars at a project like this because we can afford to, and mislead the wider community into what is good for their health. because we think we're morally and ethically superior, because we now have become enlightened and we know how to not hurt animals on planet Earth by only eating plants. So we are going to lead people to believe that's better for human health, when actually what we're doing is jeopardizing human health in the process. Isn't that sad? I just think that is one of the most selfish motivations, to disrespect and disregard the health of your fellow human in this manner. I haven't quite finished yet. I mean, the reason I just talked about that is because we're back into James Wilkes talking about his dad surviving the heart attack, and it's all because he eats plants. And there's so many other people who have the same story of surviving these kind of life-threatening illnesses without only eating plants. I'm just trying to understand the connection here. But you can watch this with a totally biased viewpoint and you'll love what they're telling you, because it aligns with what you already thought you believed in. Yeah, they're excited. They're having a birthday meal with the family, and James's dad is just turned 71, so everyone's excited and he's glad to be here. But my mum just turned 71 a couple of weeks ago, and we're all glad she's still here too, by the way. But she turned 71 still eating meat, dairy and eggs. But these guys have gone the vegan route, and that's why he's still here today. There's no question they believe that. And if you're watching this, so should you. You should just believe that. That's the only reason he's still here. He's just a lucky guy, isn't he?
What's up? What's good with?
Well, I must say I'm pretty happy that we did come back to Bruce Lee, because I said right at the start I didn't know if he was going to make a return here but Bruce Lee said the quest for truth is only useful if you are prepared to take action on what you find. Well, that's awesome, Bruce. Thanks for letting us know that. I think most of us actually do that. James has gone down one track here with his idea that eating plants is going to save the world, and I'm pretty happy to share my knowledge, which is the completely flip side of what I've been watching in this Moco here today. Yes, it piqued my interest because, now we're going to look at all the athletes and we're telling everyone that the future is vegan. And Virat Kohli popped up as a vegan athlete that, they're showing clips of different people. They didn't actually talk to him. So I just had a quick look. I thought, well, when did he turn vegan and how's he performed since he became a vegan? Well, apparently he became a vegan in the middle of 2018. And on his one-day stats, 2019 was his worst one-day average so far. We nearly finished 2019, but it's his worst year since 2015. And his test career stats, 2018 and 2019, have been his worst 2 years since 2015. So, it's awesome to say that he's now vegan and he's a freak. Virat Kohli is a freak. I'm a massive fan of his. And, I think that we look at all the statistics, and him and Steve Smith have been probably the best two batsmen we've seen in Test cricket since the dawn. And, you start to compare them with blokes like Brian Lara and Sachin Tendulkar, maybe Ricky Ponting, but, they're ahead of the field. I'm just saying he turned vegan and his performance has dropped. His test career average since turning vegan is down by about 16%. So maybe that's valuable information. I know that's happened since they filmed the documentary, but I'm just reading it as I see it. I'm just going to mention a couple here. They showed Venus and Serena Williams, and the vegans have been jumping all over those guys. Serena has admitted publicly she's not a vegan. She's eaten plant-based during tennis season, and then she loves to load up on chicken wings in the off-season. I mean, if you're a for real vegan, you're never, ever, ever going to eat chicken wings. Like, they then showed Novak Djokovic, who's an executive producer of this. Again, massive respect. One of my favourite all-time tennis players. But the poor bloke became a vegan because his wife was a vegan. He broke down to the point where he didn't even qualify for a Grand Slam final while he was a vegan. He went 18 months without even qualifying for a Grand Slam final after winning 13 majors leading up to that point in time. And then his old coach came back in, got to sort your diet out. He started eating seafood and eggs again and proceeded to win 3 of the next 4 majors. So he went from breaking down mentally, couldn't cope, physical injuries, to being the greatest again. And Lewis Hamilton, the most recent addition, Lewis Hamilton has become vegan. He's a race car driver who burns more fossil fuel in his day job than 99.99% of human beings on planet Earth. He owned a private jet. He used to fly around the world in his private jet, but he's going to stop eating animals and make a difference. Well, that's awesome. Good for you, Lewis. Happy days. You've become enlightened. You're going to do some positive things for planet Earth now. And, in case you guys didn't see this recently, Lewis has broken down mentally. He's depressed. He's going to give it all away. It's all pointless since he became a vegan. This is so common amongst people who become vegans. The mental health, the depression and anxiety because of their deprivation of vitamins. They're not getting the animal fats and proteins. There's still some things that science can't explain. I think this is really interesting where people keep telling me to look at the science, and even though that the science can be cherry-picked and it can be manipulated, and then there's real life cause and effect. We can look at the way people are actually experiencing life. And that tells us a lot about what's going on. Oh, cool. And we came back to the Tennessee Titans with 14 blokes on a plant-based diet. Remember, not vegan, plant-based. But I just went through a whole bunch of them earlier that have broken down and retired. So it does appear as though it worked incredibly well in that detox phase, in that initial few months when this was filmed. And most of those players have broken down and retired from their chosen sport. I'm not trying to be smart about this. I'm not smiling because that's good. I think that's sad. I genuinely think it's sad if we see the elite athletes unable to perform and entertain. Because I love sport. I'm a sports tragic. I don't want to see them breaking down and stopping competing at the highest level. So, but these are just things that have progressed since the filming of this documentary that people who watch this particular film might not be aware of. Okay, so I'm all done. We're into the credits. We're closing out now. We've just got a few little clips of people, and there was a link to some recipes. You want to go and make some recipes of vegan food. And I'm curious, actually. I might even check out that link I'm tipping, even though the whole way through the mockumentary they've talked about plant-based, I'll bet all the links are vegan, not plant-based. And then we talk about smoothies, and this is, show these blokes who are built, not like me. I'm not really built. I'm just me. But, one of the things that amuses me when we look at what is being perceived as our capability as humans. We were not built to eat animals. We were not built with our bare hands to be able to catch them and rip them apart and eat them. But were we built to make smoothies with our bare hands? The kales and the kale leaves, the blueberries, the chia seeds. We're just going to put our hand into the jar and turn it into something we can drink? Apparently, that's a relevant point that vegans make often. I hear it a lot. So it's kind of funny. I don't think there's a whole lot of vegans in the world that are raw food vegans. They might be whole food vegans, but they keep going on about the fact that fire, you couldn't eat animals without fire, but nearly all of the vegans cook their vegetables before they eat them. I don't know. Do you guys know many vegans who eat raw potato, raw sweet potato, raw pumpkin? Maybe they exist. So many of these things, just stop and think for a moment. Is it even relevant? I'm not sure. Well, I feel a bit deflated. I've got to the end of this movie. I have not been emotionally moved from my existing position to a new one. I don't feel as though I'm going to stop eating meat, dairy, or eggs anytime soon because I now know a better way. But a lot of people are, aren't they? A lot of people are watching this and saying, that's it. I'm converted. I see the comments. This is why I'm getting smashed on social media, because people know there's a better way and I need to find out the better way myself. I need to see it. I'll understand it and I'll change too. Or maybe I won't. I think my review is going to go for longer than the doco did. So I might actually make a little bit of a comment at the start of my review recommending people don't watch my review because it goes for longer than the Game Changers. But if you think you'll enjoy my review more than the Game Changers, by all means watch my review instead of the Game Changers. I genuinely believe that it should be called the Game Enders because, as I said, nearly all the people featured in this movie broke down. They had career-ending injuries as vegans or even as plant-based people. It's like they were plant-based. They weren't even vegan. They were eating animal products like dairy and eggs. A number of people featured here were eating animal products, and it was never mentioned in the duration of this entire film, which went for, I don't know, an hour and a half. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? You'd think that might be relevant information. Of course, I know there'll be people watch this and they're going to be really happy to bash me again. I'm used to being bashed these days. I'm used to being victimized. They're going to look at me and say, I look so unhealthy. I'm fat. I'm going to die soon because of my diet. Look at my skin. Look at my face. I can tell by looking myself, it's very red. And maybe that's partially genetics. Maybe partially the reason my face is red is because my ancestors were from England, Ireland, and Scotland, and we just happened to land here in Australia in a subtropical climate, and I've been out and about running around earlier today, and yes, I probably should have stayed in Ireland. I got to visit Ireland earlier this year, and I think that climate is much more suited to my skin than Australia. But whatever. I'm going to let people judge me however they choose to, however they see fit. I'm not. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. I actually sleep really well at night. I think that's partially because of my animal-based diet that I sleep so well. And I probably don't have to, suffer from the anxiety attacks that people who only eat plants do. And I don't have to go running to the loo with diarrhea 6 times a day, as so many vegans have shared their experience when they recovered from only eating plants and drinking copious amounts of fluid. You just don't get quite as thirsty when you eat animal products. They're much more satiating. They fill you up. So anyway, I'm sure I've spoken for long enough. I'm going to check out right now, guys. You can watch this in installments if you want to. If it's you don't have enough time, you can have a bit of a listen and check out. Come back whenever you want. I'll look at taking on board feedback, and happy to have a chat. If anyone has any thoughts or comments, I will endeavour to get back to you. Cheers, guys, and keep eating animal products, because I'm going to.